Good morning and welcome to this morning's webinar. My name's Jenny and I work in the international team here at Business West. Just before I hand over to our speaker for today, there's just a few housekeeping points I wanted to go through. If you're having any technical difficulties at all, please can you type those into the chat function, which is at the bottom of your screen, and we'll endeavour to help you if we can from there. We've allowed time at the end of the session for any questions. So if you have a question, please type it into the Q&A section, which is different to the chat at the bottom of your screen. And then what we'll do at the end is we'll invite you to ask your question, and we'll ask you to unmute your mic and then ask your question. If you'd prefer to be anonymous, please message the events team privately and we can read this question out for you. We'll try our best to get through all of the questions, but if we're unable to answer all, then we'll follow up post-webinar and an advisor will be in touch with you. And just finally, one last note, this webinar will be recorded just for your information. Now I'm pleased to introduce my colleague Nigel Barker, Specialist Digital Advisor for the Department for International Trade. Nigel's delivering today's webinar. Thank you, and over to you, Nigel.
Thanks, Jenny, and welcome. Can everyone hear me? I hope they can. I'm assuming so. Today, basically, we're going to be looking at how we can maximize maximize our global presence in this kind of crazy time that we're in at the moment. Before we do, though, I just wanted to share a quick slide. This is something I pulled off a couple of days ago. I think the date is about 2 weeks out of date, but that's okay. This is the picture of what happened in France with regards to e-commerce sales over the period up until I took the snapshot of COVID. And you can see from an e-commerce perspective, pretty much every sector listed there has had some sorts of gains, with the exception of the luxury kind of luxury retail and travel and tourism. Travel and tourism, it's obvious it was going to have a bit of a tough time. But basically, we are buying a lot more stuff online. That is what that says. Now, I took that picture snapshot from France. That could have been literally any country in the world, and we'd have got a very, very similar sort of picture. So what does that mean? Well, that means there's a lot more noise, there's a lot more traffic, there's a lot more stuff going on out there globally online in e-commerce sales. So how can we actually start to kind of maximize our presence and then maximize our sales? There's a theme to this. There's always a theme to my webinars and presentations. There's no prizes for guessing the theme, but I think it helps me when I'm putting them together, and I think it helps people also remember stuff that I say. I don't tend to do death by PowerPoint. There's slides, but most of it is actually about what I'm saying. The first thing we need to think about is a strategy. Now, all of your existing strategies that you might have had pre-COVID, they've gone. Largely, for most businesses, they've gone, or at least they've gone at the moment. They temporarily went out the window overnight. You will have realised that. Then we've hit a period of survival. You know, furloughing staff, people taking up the CBILS schemes, and you know, we've got through the best we can. It's not been pretty, but you know, by and large, it's been pretty good, considering that no one asked for this. All right, but we're now entering a very tricky stage where we're going to start to emerge. And what we've learned is that actually we need to be as agile as we possibly can. We need to be able to pivot quickly. And this is pretty much going to be the state of play for the future, and certainly for the foreseeable future. Businesses that are lean and are agile can evolve and will survive. And that is where we're at. We're in this massive point of evolution, I think, for a lot of businesses. So one of the first things we need to think about is how we can maximize our actual presence itself. Businesses that have relied entirely on selling through retail, they are now pivoting really quickly and developing business to consumer models, if you like, e-commerce solutions, selling through marketplace. Businesses in the services sector, they're having to evolve the way that they deliver stuff. And they're really successful ones are maximizing the channels that they're using. You've got to maximize your presence, but also without spreading yourself too thinly. You've got to balance your risk and reward accordingly. The only wrong thing to do is just to assume that we're going to go back to exactly the way it was before. We're probably not. We've talked a lot about the new normal. I think we now need to prepare for the next normal. That's a key thing. What is the next normal going to look like? And it will be a hybrid of the old normal and the new normal. It will be somewhere in the middle, in between. Businesses that can actually leverage the various things that have happened, in terms of the way the markets have moved in the last couple of weeks, last couple of months, going forwards and moving forwards. They are the ones that will stand the test of time and actually really, I think, start to come out of this, as well as can be expected. Remembering, no one actually asked for this. So how can we do that? Well, this next section, I think, is probably my key thing, actually. In order to actually attract the right audience that we want with our digital, presence online, is we have to get better at personalizing things. I love this slide. I love this guy. I really want to know this chap's story. He's got one of those really intense faces. There is a story to tell there. But how do we personalize our online offering? Well, you have to put the customer at the center of everything that you do. Too often now I see websites that are centered on the business and they're not centered on the person actually engaging with that site. They're not centered on the person, the customer that they are trying to communicate with. And that's a really common mistake. So, you have to hold your hands up and say, well, we might be guilty of doing that. I see it daily in my job, and I have continued to see it, in the sort of nearly 4 years I've been doing this particular role. I continue to see those same things happening. You're asking, who have you built this site for? Okay. There's a perception that we build a website for us as the business owner, and that is actually completely untrue. We are building the website for our audience to engage with. Okay. You do not want the website that you want, if that makes sense. You want to have the website that your customer needs. It needs to be vital in their lives. And it's why, some businesses have been incredibly successful at this. I'm just going to pick a really obvious one, Amazon. Okay. We all use it. It's everyone's, dirty little secret that they have a quick check on Amazon, see if they can get it cheaper. It's not just about price though. It's about that user experience that we get when we're there and the ease it is for us to buy. They have put us at the center of this. They've really personalized that. Okay. They know what I like when I buy stuff there. They give me good suggestions. Some of them are a bit off. Some of them are, I'm thinking, really? Okay. But by and large, they do a pretty good job. They also make it really impossible for me to not buy, because they make the buying process incredibly simple. They have really focused on me, the individual, and they focused on you, the individual. Now, that's a very difficult thing to do. How do you focus on lots of different individuals? You actually have to, by customizing the offering as much as you can to that audience. So I will see a different set of stuff in my Amazon listings feed than you will see in yours, for example. You can use all sorts of techniques for that, cookies and stuff, to your advantage. I'm not going into a technical level on this. I'm just saying this is what you need to actually be achieving. And I'm just going to show a slide which hopefully will work. We had to change systems very quickly because my audio wasn't working on my other machine. So let's hope this does work. Yes, it does. It does work. Here we go. Here it appears. This is how I help businesses to achieve, what I call a persona-based model. Again, how to build a persona. Let's say, for example, I don't know what you're selling here. I just invented this on the spur of the moment. But you might have a product. Let's say, for example, you've got some research data, okay, that you want to get out to the scientific community. So it's kind of like a B2B type of content thing. By breaking your audience down into different groups, the way that women and men consume information is quite different. There's so much evidence out there. We don't consume it the same. The way that someone in their 20s consumes information is very different to the way that someone in their 50s consumes information. Again, there's grave differences or big differences there. So actually, by presenting your content in a format that a woman who's in her mid-20s, early 30s, who's a research scientist versus, a man who's in his 50s, who might be heading up a department. The way they want to consume that information is very different. So by actually creating that content in various different ways, you can start to appeal to those different audiences. Mobilize. I've been saying this until I'm blue in the face. We all know that we use mobile phones. We all know that, we are permanently glued to our phones. There's been a 25% increase in the States on mobile phone use since lockdown, which doesn't sound like a lot, but actually that's quite a big jump. I think that's a significant jump. And we're using a lot more apps, etc., which is great, but also comes with a few problems. If you're a business, do you have an app? But actually, I'm just going to focus on the website itself. Most websites that I come across, whilst they work on a mobile, they've not been optimized for a mobile. So they will appear, but they're clunky. And the user experience of using that website on a mobile phone is not that great. And one of the reasons is the way that we design them. So we design them, you probably were sat there with a web designer and they sit there with their big 27-inch iMac, which I've got here. It's great. And they like to have that as their screen. And that's how they start designing on that particular format. And actually, 65% of search globally is on a mobile phone. More people engage with your brand for the first time on a mobile phone than they do on a desktop. In fact, the evidence is that they will only go and research you on a desktop if they're really into you, if there's something that they are actually going to continue and sort of go further down that journey. So they might just pop in and actually just, my dog's just walked into the room. I do apologize if she woofs. That's the new normal, isn't it? The next normal. Apologize about that. If they engage with you on a mobile phone, if they like you, they might go to a laptop. If not, if they don't like what they see on the mobile first, the chance of them getting to the laptop is greatly reduced. So we need to actually establish how we can engage them more on a mobile phone from the off. And that starts by designing your site for a mobile phone first. A mobile first philosophy is so important. I can't emphasize that enough because I don't see it enough. Securitize. Okay, I've used a little bit of poetic license there to kind of continue with the theme. But since coronavirus, we've seen a dramatic increase in the cases of basically website hacks. We're seeing all sorts of the dirty tricks going on. So we're seeing SQL injects are on the increase. Malware attacks are on the increase. And really, this can have serious repercussions for your business. I was talking to a client the other day that didn't realize why things were going a bit wrong with their online sales, and their website was hacked over the Christmas period, and they'd not really noticed it, and it was causing them all sorts of problems. This is a really big issue. It is on the increase, and the problem is we don't always ask the questions of our web hosting companies and our service providers in that world. And a lot of the time there's a lot of buck passing. So some of the clients I've worked with over the last 6 months talking about this stuff, no one wants to take ownership of the problem. So you, the business, has to take ownership of the problem, and you need to be asking the right questions of your, first of all, your web designers, if they're using content management systems. We know that some of the plugins are susceptible to attack on things like WordPress. Of your hosting providers, what is the security of that, and what is the kind of the backup? How can you restore? How can you get things back to normal if you do get attacked? And you have to remember, it's not personal. They are not targeting you. Most attacks are just automated bots that go out into the ether and they just look for weaknesses wherever they can find them. So they're not targeting you, they're just targeting anything they can find, anything they can get hold of. It can have really serious consequences though. I've got a client that has had their Google AdWords blocked because their site got hacked, because Google does not want to be pushing out unsecured sites. So he now has lost his AdWords account. He's trying to get it back. Hopefully he will, but he's lost his AdWords account at the moment. Massive implications, massive implications. He also dropped completely off the radars for as far as search was concerned. And we did a lot of work to get him back up into position on search. Okay. So take web security really, really seriously, especially at the moment in these crazy, crazy times, because, you know, the bots are out to get you. Contextualize. This kind of comes in line with personalization. Okay, what is the context of some of the content or the information that you are actually putting out there? How is that fitting in with the recipient's life? What is the, think about where they are currently at the moment. Contextualizing is everything. You know, we're in a situation where a lot of people are a bit unsure about the future. Some people are fearful. How does your message land in amongst all of that? So the context is really key. There's an expression that's been going around the digital world for about 10 years now, which is content is king. Okay. And whilst I understand where people are coming from, I think it's a little bit of a lie. I think I use the term relevant content is king, irrelevant content is not. But a better way of putting it is context is queen. And as we all know, the queen is actually in charge, especially on a chessboard and of the UK. So so contextualize all your content and just think, you know, how is that person going to receive this? What is going on at the moment with them? At what point in the day are you putting this information out there? How will they actually receive it to ensure you get great resonance? Because what you are after is resonance, and relevancy is really, really vital. Since I've been doing this job, I'm surprised. Only 5% of the clients I've worked with, and I've got about 250 over the last couple of years, only 5% of the clients didn't have Google Analytics installed on their sites. Great, excellent. We're all happy, brilliant. But of those 5%, of those 95% rather, that did have it, only 5% of them actually check their analytics and have any real idea what's going on. They don't really know how people are actually using their site. And the reason is because people are scared of things like Google Analytics. It's not in their comfort zone. You know, most people have a great idea for a business, especially in the SME world. They have a great idea for a business. They're really good at making stuff or thinking about stuff. They're not necessarily particularly good at analyzing stuff, you know, and that is a skill, but it's really, really vital because you need to be able to see how people are engaging with your brand. You know, what are the bounce rates like? What is the dwell time like? How many times are they coming back to the site? When they're on the site, where are they going? Can you improve their customer journey by giving them somewhere else to go on your site? Because we know that the longer someone stays on your site, the more likely they are to actually start making purchasing decisions or contact you if you need to, you know, if you're in the services industry. So it's really, really key. It's your best friend, Google Analytics. Okay, it can be a little bit like diving down the rabbit hole. You can be a bit Alice in Wonderland on it, but actually, if you can start to really create some benchmarks and see what improvements you make to your site and how that affects your users and your customers, then great. Then just take advantage of it. So here's a slide. Answer on a postcard. What are those there? And you're probably saying, well, that's a cream tea. And what I'm going to say now is the bigger picture is a cream tea, and the one in the little bubble, well, I have no idea what that is because I'm a Cornishman and I'm speaking from Cornwall right now. I've got no idea what that is. It's not a cream tea that I recognize. Okay. So you might be chuckling and thinking, but they're the same thing. And actually, if you're from the planet Zag, you would think they were the same thing, but to a Cornishman, the one on the right isn't a cream tea. It's just gone some jam and some cream. Okay. We're really fiercely protective of our cream teas. You've probably seen all the press about it. Same as pasties in the way you crimp those, but the jury's always out on that one. But in a nutshell, that kind of sums up what I mean when I talk about localization. Different audiences around the world receive different messages visually, orally, verbally, in completely different ways. Something that works somewhere does not work elsewhere in other parts. If I just take for example, the bread roll, there's 19 different names for a bread roll in the UK, depending on where you are. You know, if you're in Liverpool, they might call it a bin lid. If you're in the northeast of England, you might call it a barm cake. Down in Cornwall, we call it a split. So actually, even within the UK, we've got lots of localization issues. So when you then start thinking about going globally, your message that works in one country may not work in another country. So I don't talk about translation, I talk about localization. Okay. And I can talk at length, I don't have time today, but translation is a small part of localization. And it's not a one size fits all kind of scenario, but you know, you've got phases of localization. There's what I call machine learned translation, Google Translate. That's one thing. Okay. Then you've got professional translation, which is better. Then you have more localization, where you take into account the different nuances of the cultures and you know, and actually proper translation in terms of you know, how people speak, not necessarily what the correct word is, but how they actually refer to stuff, phrases, etc. And the last thing is you've got transcreation, whereby actually you create entirely separate content ideas for those different territories. You know, and that's what the big boys do. We know that. You know, there is a sliding scale. What you have capacity to do will dictate where you go. But the closer you can get to transcreation, the more effective your marketing and your global you know, presence, if you like, will become. And if you think about it, what I said at the start of it is personalization, is personalize your site. If you're talking to somebody in Italy, you need to be talking to that particular person as an Italian person, you know, not as a British person. You know, they're very, very different. So, you know, just think about that. Optimization, optimize. I don't think anyone can see that. Sorry, it's got a funny color on this screen. But actually, you know, we talk about optimization all the time. Every single thing that you do online should be optimized for whatever platform you are looking to represent that on. So if you are listing things on Amazon, you have to optimize your listings for Amazon to increase your chance of being found. If you want to be found in search, you need to have your web pages and your site fully optimized so that you return really well in search. I know it sounds really obvious, but actually this is kind of a big job, and it's not, again, something that you do once and then forget about. It's constantly ongoing. I was with a client just before Christmas, and we were looking at her Amazon listings, and she noticed that she'd sort of dropped off. And what she hadn't noticed is that there was a very slight change in the rules on length of title or something. It was a very simple change, but she had to kind of go through all of her listings and just re-optimize them because she was losing character and she was losing traffic that way. So it's a continuous thing, optimization. If you're actually using channels like Instagram or LinkedIn or Twitter, you need to optimize the content you're putting on those channels for those particular platforms, because different channels require different content. They require different impetuses, and they also, you know, give you different rewards accordingly. So, you know, it's not just a question of chucking a message out and copying it to all the platforms. You have to think about each individual platform accordingly. This is an obvious one. And again, I don't see enough of it. And that is scrutinize what you've done, check your work. You know, I was one of those kids at school, and this is, you know, completely honest. I would quite often, you know, hand an essay in, and I hadn't necessarily dotted the I's, crossed the T's, or correctly sort of spell checked something. Because I was thinking about the next thing. And this is what we do, is we do something and think, right, we've got to go on to the next thing. We've got to go on to the next thing. You need to check what you're doing. You need to scrutinize. Are we doing this as well as we can? Is this as good as it can be? Or is it as good as it needs to be? You know, minimum viable product. I think the key word in minimum viable product is viable, you know, and things being correct is that minimum element. You can't have things going out there incorrect. So really scrutinize your work and check it thoroughly. And if you've got a website that appears in different countries, you know, let's say, for example, you've localized your site to Germany, the US, and to Italy. I just throw those ones in there. You can only see how you actually appear within those territories, you know, with regards to search, etc., if you're actually often within that country. So, you know, using things like VPNs, virtual private networks, that kind of help you appear as though you're within that territory. So you are, because you're actually accessing a computer in Italy or in the States to actually then look at your site. How's it working? What is it? Where's it coming in search? How are we being represented? Because it's really, really key. The more you do that, the more feedback you get. Feedback is a gift. Negative feedback is a gift. I always think that. Sometimes it hurts, and sometimes you have to give yourself a little bit of negative feedback and go, do you know, that is not as good as it could be, so we'll do it differently next time. Socialize. I mentioned earlier, social media is seeing a huge upsurge. If I told you that in India we've seen an increase of 87% in social media use since lockdown, that's largely dominated by Facebook and WhatsApp, but also quite a lot of Twitter. Facebook is now quoting that it's got 3 billion users at a massive, huge increase, which is when you take China out of the equation, because they're not using Facebook, and that's kind of about 50% of the population. And social media in the United States, they've got 25% of all mobile phone use now is for social media since COVID. So how you actually represent yourself on social media is really, really vital, but you need to be feeding that beast. And it is a beast. You need to understand who your audience is. So I talk about the personas, where your audience is, and what social platforms they exist on, and positioning yourself accordingly. Because as we discover new brands, which is great, we love discovering new brands, especially at the moment, we're doing a lot of that. We will check social to see whether or not they are genuine, valid, whether they're good, what do people say about them. So you have to have a really active social media feed. You need a strategy for it in its own right, okay, to enable you to maximize those opportunities, because we are communicating that way so much more than we ever have, especially over this period. And I think the genie is out of the bottle. It's been out of the bottle a while, but I don't think it's going to go in anytime soon. So the groundwork that you're doing at the moment, the groundwork you do now, will stand you in good stead for later life. You need to plan this. Don't make it reactive, make it proactive. Actually really have a strategy for how you're going to use social media. And finally, my final slide. So I'm going to get to time, I think, just about, which is good. And that is advertise. So again, of all the clients that I work with, couple of hundred clients that I've been working with over the last few years, at the point of starting to speak to them, I did a quick back of the fag packet calculation, and about 15% of them said they had an advertising budget, which means 85% of them didn't have an advertising budget. Okay. I'm not as harsh as some people, but I have heard the expression is, if you don't have an advertising budget or a marketing budget, are you even actually a business? Because actually the difference between success or failure is telling people that you exist, and advertising is absolutely vital. So this is on the increase as well. Anecdotally, I spoke to an agency friend of mine, someone I've been working with for a long time, and I know them very well. And they've said they've seen a 200% increase in revenue for managing Google AdWords accounts. That's not the spend that's going on Google. That's an increase in revenue in their own agency for people saying, can you please run our Google AdWords over this period of time, because it's really, really important. So that's just gone through the roof. They're having to take on more staff just to cover that workload. So advertising is really, really vital. And the businesses that do advertise and do advertise well will actually reap the rewards. There's a funny thing, advertising though. We as human beings don't like being advertised to. We don't like being sold to. What we like is relevant, useful information and content. Okay. That is what we actually respond best to. We like to think that the messages pushed towards us, we do think if they resonate with us, if they're personalized to us, if they are relevant to us, it doesn't seem like advertising. Little anecdote I always use is the Domino's pizza menu that comes through the door. And, my wife's vegetarian. We're practically all vegetarians in this house. And if we have pizza, we have, a homemade quinoa and semolina pizzas, or whatever it is. So when the Domino's pizza menu comes through the door, I go to the front door mat with the tongs, and I pick it up at arm's length and I drop it in the recycling, because we don't want that Domino's stuff in our family, polluting our kids. When I was a student, that was relevant dietary advice and got pinned to the fridge. So at one point, it's the parent in me sees that as hideous advertising, and the student sees that as really useful information, because I need a pizza delivered to my house, on a Friday night. two very different ways of looking at exactly the same content. So the more relevant you make your content to your audience, the more you personalize that, the less that feels like advertising. Okay. And the more that feels like it's going to enrich their lives, and that actually will take the time to engage with it. And we haven't all, but the vast majority of us have actually, bought something recently online through an advert. I have, several times. I actually got scammed recently as well. Hands up. I didn't follow my own advice. I got scammed. I bought something that looked too good to be true. It was too good to be true. I bought that off an advert. So, even I'm now going through PayPal to get my money back. But yeah, advertising is really, really key. It is on the increase. That is, that's a double-edged sword. Okay. Because what that means is, because of the way the advertising model works at the moment, which is pay-per-click, which is a bidding system, that means the cost for advertising will go up. Okay. And you will see that more people that are advertising, the more competition there is. And that's how bidding systems work. So you need to have that budget that at your disposal that you can utilize. If you don't have that budget, you're going to find it really hard to break into any new markets globally, or even maintain position in existing markets, especially at the moment, because everyone's vying for that finite amount of space. Okay. So you have to sit there and think, when you're devising a strategy, how much can we actually put towards advertising? That is my final slide on that particular presentation. I had to do it a little bit blind because I had to change systems, so I didn't have my notes, but I think we got through that okay. I hope that was good. Going to now hand over to go to this slide, which is the Q&A. Has anyone got any questions that have come in? I can't see the chat screen from here. Sorry, Jenny. Is that Jenny there? Oh, no.
Sorry, it would help if I unmuted my microphone. We do have one question that's been set privately, and said, if it's not too big a question, what are the key measures to focus on within Google Analytics?
Okay.
If you're finding it too big a task, are there any key things that are best to look at rather than the whole lot?
Yeah, and this does vary from business to business, okay, but I would always check on the bounce rates for particular, just overall, but also individual parts of your site. So how's your blog doing if you've got a blog? Bounce rate is really, really key, okay? How much traffic you're getting is really, really key as well. That's a really, really important thing. I always check that with clients. What your referral sources are, so how are people coming to you, what query strings they are using and responding to, because that can help you modify your keyword strategy. That's really, really key. But also, what are people doing when they're on your site? So the user's flow is really, really useful. I've got a really good anecdote, actually. I love an anecdote. It makes me think that we can still go to the pub and tell anecdotes, which we can't. But yeah, I was working with a client, and they had a website designed, and they were getting a lot of traffic. They knew they were getting an awful lot of traffic, and they weren't actually making that many sales from mobile phones. Actually, so it's a very specific thing. They were getting sales through people logging on a laptop, but when they were on the mobile phone, there was a real issue. So actually, the user flow there pretty much told me exactly what I needed to know. We looked at all the traffic filtered out through mobile phones, and saw that everyone was going to the product pages and then just dropping off the face of the earth. They were just disappearing. That big, thick red line that goes vertically, and no green lines going through to the checkout. From that, instantly, I could see that there was probably a problem, because when you looked at laptops, they were going, a proportion, a fairly decent proportion actually as well, was going through to checkout. And actually, instantly thought there's an issue on these pages, on this product page on a mobile phone. Sure enough, when we actually checked it in reality, you couldn't click on the button. The button wasn't there. It didn't exist on that page. Okay, because the way the thing hadn't been designed from a mobile first point of view. So that users flow thing, if you can get your head around that, that's really, really useful. I find that fascinating. It is a little bit like Alice in Wonderland. You can actually go further down the rabbit hole. But those would be my top tips. So check your individual bounce rates and see how they're, whether that's changing. See what content works and what enables people to, what creates more of a reason for people to stay. Okay, not all content does land. I know I've been writing content for years and years and years and years and years. And I used to be a radio presenter, and sometimes you come up with something you think is really going to land well, and it doesn't. So think about that, and also think about how people are coming to your site. Those are really, really quick ones.
Great, thanks for that, Nigel. We do have a question that's come in from Herman. Herman, we're just going to unmute your microphone if you'd like to ask Nigel your question, and then he might be able to help.
Hi, Nigel.
Hi, Herman.
Yes, we used Facebook ads.
Yep.
And despite our setting our audience preferences, when we used it, it was clear that they were just sending our ad to click farms, definitely not our audience. Is there a way to, a better way to do this?
So they weren't using your targeting at all?
No, it didn't.
No, not at all.
Okay. How were you setting this up? Were you boosting posts? Were you doing this in?
And then
we were boosting posts.
it was an ad, actually a specific ad that we paid for on Facebook post.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sorry. I just have my wife here who actually posted this. Do you want to explain this?
Yeah. So it's just we made a custom Facebook ad and then clicked all the preferences for our sort of audience settings with, the keywords. And then when the ad was running, I realized that the clicks that we were receiving, they were, 16-year-olds, and our audience is like 30 and above. And it was just clearly not at all. And it was, definitely click farm, but I just wondered if maybe there's a better way to use.
So were you using Ads Manager or just Boost?
I think it was just Boost.
Okay, so you might find actually you go through Ads Manager, you'll get better results. But also the more you limit there's the and or option, and you need. I always divide the audiences as small as I possibly can, and actually make sure that they fulfill all of the criteria in that particular audience for that ad set. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
As opposed to saying any of these, because that's what I have found. You say, you say you want this is who you want, but then you also saying, but anybody that's also into cars and trains and bananas, and actually what you want is someone who's into cars and trains and bananas, not cars or trains or bananas. And I think that's where things get a bit messed up. Would you like, if you want, I can have a chat with you in a bit more length offline about this, because it is a little bit of a further down the rabbit hole kind of situation, if that makes sense. So if you make sure we've got your details, then we can arrange a Zoom chat in the next day or two.
Excellent. Thank you.
You're more than welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for that, Nigel. We'll make
You're
sure
welcome.
that you two are connected with
Brilliant,
that.
thank you.
We've also got a message here, a question from Janine. Your mic isn't, I'll read it. Janine's mic isn't working.
Okay.
She said, we get bombarded with emails from companies offering SEO services. How do we decide who can do the job best? What questions do we need to ask of these companies? And what should we look for?
Right. Okay.
Previously used a company in India and had good results, but we constantly had to edit their blogs because of poor English, etc. What would be a reasonable cost for these services?
Okay, so SEO is this kind of almost a mythical beast. It's not a mythical beast. It's a genuine beast, but it is a confusing landscape for people, and I fully get that. I have to say, I always think about choosing an agency in exactly the same way as when I am looking to buy a new car. And I don't buy new cars very often, I buy secondhand cars. But I ask people for recommendations, and I actually base a lot of my decisions in that respect on who have they worked for in the past, what sort of response, what sort of references can you get when choosing an SEO agency, because there are really, really good ones and you will pay upwards of £100 an hour for, and there are some really, really bad ones that you will also pay possibly up to £100 an hour for as well. And actually, the important thing is, does the agency understand your business? That's the real key thing, actually, is does the agency understand what you do, what you are trying to do, and what you do for the consumer, for the customer. It's funny you say about on a technical level, you can get some really good results out of agencies, people in India and across the world. But again, you've got the issue with regards to rewriting, some of the copy if they're writing blog posts for you. So recommendations is really, really key. But do they get you? Do they really understand what you do? Don't fall for the beauty parade. Again, it's about relevance, isn't it? Actually, it's exactly what I said. Have they put you, the business, at the center, or are they just quoting numbers at you? Because it's very, very easy for agencies, and I've worked in an agency, and you kind of go for headline figures, but actually the companies that we worked with best are the ones that we really understood what they were about, because then we were able to optimize and create the content for their particular audience. So it is a little bit of a minefield out there. I've got people that I trust and some that I kind of think they could probably do a bit of a better service. And again, if you want me to have a chat with you offline about that, I genuinely can. Only too happy. I won't go into specific companies on here, but there's a few that you should certainly consider talking to, and some of them won't necessarily actually take on the work at the moment, but they're a good sounding board. They won't take on the work because they're too busy. I know that because I got told that yesterday.
Great, thank you, Nigel. Janine said she's happy to talk offline, so I'll connect you to after this webinar as well.
Thank you.
I think that's all for questions, unless anybody has any others that they would like to quickly type in. And if not, I'm going to presume there are no more. Okay, just to say we're about to wrap up today's webinar, and thank you very much for joining us, and we hope you found it insightful. And thanks, Nigel, for your time and expertise. There are more webinars available on the Business West website to help you trade through coronavirus period and beyond. So please visit and see if there's any other subjects that may help you in your business. And just before you go, there's a poll about to come up on your screen. It's only 3 very quick questions, and would really appreciate it if you could just answer those for us, just to give us a gauge on if this was useful or not. And just to say thank you and goodbye, and we hope to see you again soon. Thank you, bye.
Thank you. Take care. Stay safe.